Welcome to another episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? A weekly video podcast features creatives, writers, and readers when we come together to talk about books. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, author of 4 novels and counting. I am so glad you're here. I think you're going to enjoy our next guest. I am so delighted that you are back with us today. And I am super excited that Janis Robinson Daly is back as well. Hey, Janis.
Hey, Karen, thanks so much for having me back again.
Oh, I'm just so glad to see you. I had the pleasure of reading both of Janis's books. And so it's, when I do so many of these 3.5 years, I can't read every book of every author that I interview, it's every week. But I did get to read both of your books, and I'm so excited for us to have a chance to share them with the audience. You met Janis last year, early in the year. We did a special podcast on women's history, and that was the first time. And now she is out with a brand new book that's a sequel.
Right. Yes.
Yes, yes. So
Yes.
let me just tell you a little bit about her. So she's the author of The Unlocked Path, which we talked about last year. Now you have to put it right in front of your face because
No,
of the blur.
the blur.
No, we still can't see it.
Okay. Okay. Go,
Oh,
keep going. I'm gonna unblur. There.
you'll fix it. Oh, yes, there it is. The Unlocked Path. Look at that. And then she has a new one that's coming out today. Today that this will be aired, The Path Beneath Her Feet. And look at that. Isn't that so cool? So cool. So, Janice, tell us, I'm curious, when you started with the first one, did you always know there was going to be a second? Or how did that come about? How did you end up thinking about writing a second?
Yes. No intention of writing the first or the sequel. um, but as a first-time author with the Unlocked Path, you learn so much, and you have to take advantage of opportunities to learn and take advice that you're given through those opportunities. So I actually, before I was published, before I even had a publisher, my manuscript was done. And I was so proud of myself for writing a book that I went to a writer's conference that had some agents and editors there. And I started, spewing about my book and that it covered the life of my main character, Eliza Edwards, from 1897 to 1957. And, my manuscript was spot on for historical fiction, about 90,000 words. And they were saying, "Are you stupid? You can't cover that much history in a 320-page book. You're not going to do justice to that amount of history. And you're not Ken Follett or Diana Gabaldon to write a 900-page book that someone's going to read." So, best advice ever, find a logical stopping point in your story and set your readers up for a sequel. And then flesh it out a lot more for that sequel. And so I followed that advice. So I
That's,
just when I thought I was done,
that's
I
so
had to
excellent.
refigure.
That was really good advice, though, because both books really complement each other. You left us with wanting more, but still with a satisfying ending.
Yeah.
We felt satisfied as readers, but knowing that there was going to be another book also set us up for wanting to read the second one. So good advice, wise you, wise you. So share the setting and the premise of actually of both books.
Okay, sure, sure. So the Unlocked Path again was the first, and that is set 1897 to 1920. And it follows my main character, Eliza Edwards, who at age 18, at that time, the cusp of womanhood and what is my life going to look like next? Of course, the 1800s, not many women went on to
Yeah.
secondary education. So she was trying to figure out what she wanted to do and was fortunate that she had some other female influences in her life that helped direct her. And she found that she had a calling to study medicine. And she
Mm.
wanted to study medicine and practice medicine and take care of others, particularly other women who really lacked, the resources to quality medical care at that time.
Yeah.
Because a lot of male physicians, unfortunately, were very dismissive of women's health issues. So I take her into one of the first women's medical college, which was in Philadelphia, and we follow her through her 4 years of college, her early residency, her early career, and then we leave her actually in Boston. She's moved from Philadelphia to Boston in 1920. So that kind of young woman coming of age a little bit, struggling to get through medical school as every student today still does, has that challenge, and facing all that comes with it, particularly trying to be a woman in medicine when only
Yeah.
5% of our doctors
All
were
the
women.
misogyny, all the lack
Oh,
of
yeah,
belief. And it's so interesting, Janice, because I keep hoping that things have changed. But when you read Lessons in Chemistry, it
yeah,
happens in the 60s, and you see how she was treated as a
yeah,
as a scientist. And I can remember my own experiences with male doctors
yeah,
who just had no sympathy, no understanding, no empathy. I'm not saying all male doctors were
right.
terrible, just
No,
saying that it was a time when they were still being dismissive of
yeah,
women. So Eliza is quite, quite the brave and determined
yeah.
character to push through all of the obstacles that she found.
Right, right. Yeah. So we leave her in 1920 as she's just really getting started as her career begins in private practice. And by this time, she's also the mother to two young boys. So we start to, have hints of, the working mother scenario and those challenges that come. So we leave her in a good spot. And then, as a writer, we're always told, well, people don't want just to read happy fluff with just that's for romance novels, and that's great, and that's fine. But historical fiction, people want to learn and they want to be educated about their past. And so in our minds, the 1920s were, the roaring 20s and people doing the Charleston, having fun. So there wasn't a lot of strife and challenges, you know, on the outside, big picture impression. So what better way to get started with challenges, but let's pick her back up in the middle of the Depression, 1936. So 1936, of course, the Depression is full blown. And, up to almost, 30% of the American population is out of work, the working age population. And again, for a woman, any job anywhere at that time, if there was a job, it was going to the men, the head of the household who had to support their family. And so Eliza starts to encounter that in her practice, and then needs to find a job and can't, because even hospitals are saying any jobs we have to go to the men. So she's lost again, trying
Mm.
to find. I, I may be now in my late 50s, but I ain't done yet, girl. I've got a lot more years in me and a lot more ability to still take care of others and practice medicine and practice my profession. And I'm not ready to stop. And don't tell me I'm ready to stop. So she travels upon some other paths, and her search for where she can practice her craft. And we take her from Boston to some very interesting other spots. Even the cover, I hope, implies a little bit more of a rustic feel,
Mhm.
because we take her to Warm Springs, Georgia, which, if
Yeah.
anyone knows their history, it was, and still does have, a rehabilitation center for, at the time, polio patients. Of course, it was started by FDR, also affected by polio. And then we move Eliza to Appalachia, so where folks can learn that there was a group of American medical women's hospitals that opened in Appalachia to bring medical care to those rural communities. So we set Eliza into some other locations and then do bring her back to Boston again, in her role as a caregiver for family members
Yeah.
who
And
are
she runs
aging.
into lots of all kinds of relationship
Yeah,
challenges and we see her as a mother. We see some of and a wife,
and a
as
wife.
some of
Yep.
the challenges. So it's rich, rich with historical detail, but it's also rich with character,
Mm.
well-rounded character. So um, Eliza has so many interesting characteristics. She's a well-founded woman. What are some of the things that you love about her?
Yeah. I think it is her calling to care for others. She really does, um, completely takes off any curtains. She doesn't care who that person is. If it's a person who needs to be cared for, she's going to do that. She's not going to let any biases interrupt her, ability or thoughts of how can I help whoever it is in front of me at that point in time that I can take care of, where I have the skills to do that and experience. Or she learns them. She goes to
Yes.
she goes to Warm Springs and she learns physical therapy
Yeah, I love
skills.
that part of the book.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, she's willing to learn things. She's willing to try things. She's very loyal.
yes,
Besides being very caring, she's a
yeah,
very, very loyal person. And you have lots of interesting characters around her. The cast of
yeah.
the cast of characters. Um, what's your process for deciding who else needs to be there, or
Yeah.
or does your main character tell you who they need? How does that work for you?
Well, some of them just pop in, from who knows where they've been inspired from. But I when I stop to think about that, I'm thinking they serve a purpose in defining an issue, perhaps, that I want to address in the story.
Hmm.
So, two quick examples for each book. The Unlocked Path, I have a child that's born under Eliza's maternity work. A child born with, at the time, it was called Down, now defined as Down syndrome. So a child with developmental challenges. And Eliza, I think her treatment and approach to that child, his care, and interacting with his parents at that time in around 1901, again, very, very different times. I think really showcased the first instance of Eliza wanting to just care for that person, regardless of who or what they were. And then Aunt Florence, who is one of my other favorite characters, is Eliza's feisty maiden aunt, who's only 20 years older than her. So they have a nice relationship, but very involved in the suffrage movement of the times of the early years. And I wanted to make sure, in that early 1900s, as the 19th Amendment was being introduced and finally ratified, that the suffrage movement was so strong. And that circle of women being influenced to be told, you deserve the right to vote and you deserve this and you need to have this. And that empowers Eliza as well.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that she was a great character.
Yeah.
She was a lovely, feisty aunt. Absolutely. Um, did when you were researching,
Mm-hmm.
uh, was there any tidbit, any little something that you uncovered that you like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. I didn't know that.
Oh, so many, but I know we only
Okay,
have a few minutes.
yes,
So with the path
focus.
beneath her feet, even though, I originally said I thought I had a manuscript done, I probably only ended up using about 10% of that original manuscript in the book.
Mm,
I went back and did a lot more research into the time period. And I was very fortunate. I went back to the archives of Drexel University, who has all the archives of the Women's Medical College, and was researching their materials for the 30s and 40s. And I found this little pamphlet in the folders they had pulled for me. And I was like, what is this? It was congressional hearings in 1942. World War II is now, we're full on into the war. And it was a congressional hearing to amend a public law that was basically stating, the US government now has the ability to invoke a draft and could
mhm.
draft medical professionals. So any person working in medicine as a doctor could be drafted, and their service, applied then to the US Army Medical Corps or Navy Corps. And then when they started to get women showing up, volunteering before even waiting
Mm,
for the draft. They're like, well, what are you doing here? Well, it's the persons could be. Well, women aren't people. We didn't mean
ah,
women. We meant
yeah,
just the men. They had to have congressional hearings to amend the law to say men and women so that women could enter the U.S. service and receive, this was the difference, receive full benefit, a ranking, and retirement benefits. Because before
wow.
that, none of the women medicals had that, received that.
Yeah.
So
And I just finished reading Kristen Hanna's The
the
Women
women, yeah, same
and
idea.
how the nurses were treated and how many
Exactly.
times the main character was told, no, there were no women in Vietnam.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, there was. I was there. Nope, you weren't. I mean,
Yeah.
how far we've come
And
and
yeah,
yet.
yeah,
And yet. So tell us, this is what are you reading? What are you writing?
yeah.
So is there a book that you've read recently that you could recommend to our audience?
Well, you just mentioned one of them, The Women by Kristen Hanna. I was at a writers' conference last week talking about historical fiction, and I made everyone stand up and bow down to a picture of Kristen Hanna because for historical fiction, she is amazing. Um, so The Women definitely. And then another book that I actually heard about on a presentation that you gave recently, Karen, through Adventures by the Book. Akmaral by Judith Lindbergh is the
Mm,
story of women in ancient um, Eastern Eastern Europe, Western Asia, kind of that area, but it was women warriors. And it was a
yes.
fascinating book. And so both of those two I've read now already in preparing for my 2025 Women in History book list.
Excellent, excellent,
Yeah,
excellent. So, how can our audience find you, find your books, find out more about you? Um, what is your website like? Just tell
sure.
them how they can find you.
Thank you so much. Yes. So my website is Janis, and it's Janis with an S, R Daly, Daly, no E or I, but the Daily. So just janisrdaily.com is my website. You can sign up for my newsletter right there. which put out a newsletter every month with lots of book recommendations of what my book clubs are reading it and where my different events are. I'm on social media. I can only manage two. So I'm just on Facebook, Janis Robinson Daly author, and Instagram, Janis R. Daly writer. So folks are welcome to follow me there. And books are available wherever books are sold. Ask your local independent bookstore. They can order it for you, or your local library. Of course, Amazon, ebook. I'm waiting to hear about an Audible version for the sequel, but there is an Audible version for The Unlocked Path. So, yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And her newsletter really is good. There's got lots and lots of things that any reader would just be happy to read. I hope that you will follow Janis. I hope you'll sign up for her newsletter. I hope you will buy her books. I hope that you will write reviews because those are so important to us. And I thank you so much for joining us again. We'll see you next time. What are you reading? What are you writing? Bye, everybody. Bye, Janis.
Thank you, Karen.